Hello, welcome to Stories for Wonderful Children, the podcast where I share the recordings of the bedtime stories I've improvised for my children over the years. I'm Dan Wendelin, your host and storyteller. For almost 20 years, I made up a new story for my children every night at bedtime. Many of those stories were recorded, and now I'd like to share the very best of those with you. I hope you enjoy these stories for wonderful children.
The next day, Dak and Curry came to visit and to meet Pontiface. They all sat down to lunch and they introduced Dak and Curry to him.
Ooh.
And told
I think
they told
somebody might have picked up the tea and their hands stuck and Pontiface might have laughed a little.
But they told Pontiface the story of Dak and Curry and how they had met. And they told him the story about how the Sea King had made it so that whenever they were in the ocean, they were mer people. And whenever they were out on land, they had legs. And Pontiface said, "Really?" And Dak said, "Yeah." And Pontiface picked up his glass of water, and he threw it at them. And then he looked under the table and he said, "But you still have legs." And Dak was mopping the water off his face, and he said, "It only works with ocean water." "Oh," said Pontiface. "My apologies." And they finished dinner. They finished lunch. And Curry said, "Well, Jester Pontiface, will you entertain us?" And so Pontiface got up and sang an extremely silly song, all about a milkmaid who could not find her milking stool when she had to milk cows. And so she had instead piled up piles of cow manure to sit on.
Cow poop?
Yeah, to milk the cows, and how it had made her skirts smell funny. And it doesn't sound that funny when I just say it like this, but when Pontiface sang it, it was hilarious. And they all laughed.
How did it win?
And they all laughed until...
How did it go?
I don't know the song, I'm not Pontiface. They all laughed until tears ran down their faces. They were laughing so hard. And then Dak and Curry said how much they admired the new green walls of the castle. And they had just finished breakfast when a messenger came running in, breathless. He bowed to Queen Ia and he said, "Your Majesty, dire news. There's a giant in your lands." And he is headed towards the castle. "Is this a giant we know?" asked Ia. Because there were several friendly giants who came and sometimes visited her at the castle, and who had permission to go to and fro in her kingdom. "I think not," said the messenger. "I think that he carries a club, and he has attacked several farms, and made off with cows and sheep that he has made meals of." "See," said he. "Thank you." She turned to Dak and she said, "Will you make the guards ready? We would prefer to have as many men carrying bows as possible. The giant's strength is not to his advantage." And not long at all had gone by when they could feel the ground shake just slightly, and they went up to the castle walls to see, and they could see the giant coming from very far off. He strode up. All the archers got arrows and put them in their bows. And the giant came up and he said, "Queen Ia, I am Shardock. I have come to Wire Castle Green." Ia said, "We found it a pleasant color to paint our walls green." "Ah," said Shardock, "and why is there a happy face on your drawbridge?" "That would be our jester, Pontiface," said Ia. "How may we help you?" "You may not help me," said Shardock. "I've come to defeat your guards, so that I may then have the rule of your kingdom and do as I please." At that point, just as Io was about to give the signal to the archers to draw their bows back, something quite remarkable happened. Pontiface. That's what I said. Pontiface jumped up onto the very edge of the castle wall and began to walk along the edge of the wall. Everyone simply watched him. The giant, Ia, Dak, the guards, and then he did a somersault on the top of the wall. Everyone held their breath. They were sure he was going to fall, but he didn't. He sprang upwards directly into a cartwheel across the top of the wall. And then he did a backflip and executed a perfect dive into the moat. He made almost no splash as he went into the water, and then nothing. They didn't see him come up. They didn't see him swimming around. The giant leaned way forward, peering down into the water. "Hey," he said, "where'd he go?" And he leaned way down in the water, and when his face was just a few feet above the water, Pontiface surfaced from the water, and with a great mouthful of water went squirted it right in the giant's face, and the giant went, "Hi!" And everyone was worried that he was about to draw his club and squish Pontiface, when the giant went, "Ha, ha, 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 you're silly. I like you. I take you with me." And Pontiface said, "Oh, I'm afraid I have to stay here. I'm attached to the castle." "You're attached to the castle? I don't see anything attaching you to the castle." "Oh," said Pontiface, "it's magic. See, watch." And he got out of the moat and started to walk away from the castle, and then stopped and fell over right on his bottom as if he had suddenly hit an invisible wall. And then he stood up and began to feel the air in front of him as if his hands were right along the wall. And he couldn't get through it. He even made a show of running up and then suddenly hitting a wall and recoiling and falling down to the ground. It was rather amusing to watch, actually. But it was also quite convincing. "All right," said the giant. "Well, I can't destroy the castle if you're here, because you entertain me. Perhaps I will come from time to time and see your antics, little man." Well, Pontiface made quite the silly bow, in which he faced quite the wrong direction and so stuck his butt right out at the giant. And the bow went forward so low and so deep that suddenly he was doing a somersault right forward and springing up again into a handstand. He stuck his tongue out at the giant and said, "Suit yourself." And then he ran up to the moat, and in a trick that no one knew how he did, not even Shan, Pontiface seemed to leap right across the moat, perhaps just lightly touching the water with his feet, and springing to the castle wall, climbed straight up it until he was once again at the top. The giant...
Like walking straight up?
No, like climbing. Hands and feet. Climbing with hands and feet.
Falling right up it?
Ia looked over at Shan, who simply shrugged, and then they watched as the giant turned and left peaceably, still chuckling to himself. He did not chuckle half as hard, though, as the people in the castle, who saw that painted in yellow and black paint, squarely in the middle of his gigantic butt, was a big yellow smiley face.
Thanks for listening to Stories for Wonderful Children. I created today's story, but heckling and clever commentary were supplied by my children. The theme music was created by Brandon Thompson, and the logo was designed by Silas Wendelin. If you know someone who might enjoy the stories, please tell them about the show. Our website is storiesforwonderfulchildren.com, and preview snippets are posted to most social media. I'm Dan Wendelin, reminding you to tell someone you love a story.